Genuine question to everyone out there watching this video. Do you like Axel? Let me ask another question. Is she somewhere on your tier list that's outside of the bottom 4? And one more question just for funsies. If you answered yes to both of those previous questions, why? What does Axel have going for her? By all accounts, she's really just a diet version of Joe and Sean meshed together, and the only thing she has in addition to that is her relationship with Ripper. And her relationship with Ripper is awful, and I hate it. So there's honestly not that much to talk about with Axel. So if that's the case, you may be asking why I'm making this video at all. And the answer to that is because I'm pretty sure I promised that I'd cover all the characters in the reboot, so I had to get to Axel eventually, might as well do it now. But because Axel is so unbelievably shit, I was kinda strapped for options, because it's not like I could do a normal analysis video. I'm not nearly as passionate about her as I am Nichelle, so that wasn't gonna work. So I'm gonna flex my creative muscles for this video. I'm going to present to you 6 Axel plotlines that were better than what she actually got in the series. Now, full disclosure, based on how both seasons panned out, the likelihood of, most of these happening is slim to none based on what we've seen. But fanfiction in my ways, they don't rely on what has happened, only what can happen. And honestly, if you've seen Total Drama My Ways on YouTube, you've probably seen something a lot wackier than what you're about to see. So sit back, relax, and enjoy number 6. Make Axel the first boot. Now I know this probably sounds like a joke, but hear me out for a moment. I think it's no secret to anyone who watches this channel that I really like Caleb. I unironically liked him in Season 2, but before that I was his biggest ironic fan in Season 1. And the big reason for that is just because he did pretty much nothing in that first episode aside from stand around and look pretty, and then the way he got eliminated I found it really funny. So yeah, I like Caleb. And him being the first boot definitely works for Season 1, as it subverts expectations for the season. And it establishes Bowie as a pretty big strategic threat. But honestly, I think Axel also could have fit that role really well. I mean, she was second boot, so it'd really just be flipping around the order by 1, not much of a change. All you'd really need to change is have the Ripper and Axel rivalry happen in episode 1 instead of 2, and then have Bowie take out Caleb in episode 2, and you don't even have to change his reasoning, both can be the same. Now admittedly, this plotline does more for Caleb than it does for Axel, but giving Caleb that additional episode of screen time could, at the very least, help foreshadow his role in Season 2 a little more. Axel could also work as the subversive first boot, since before the reboot started, a lot of people thought she was gonna go really far. Now understandably, this isn't the best way to go about things. I think as is, the elimination order of Season 1 is really good, so that's why this is only at number 6. Number 5, give her a dynamic with Damien. Damien got done dirty in both seasons, so giving him something to work with is probably gonna be for the best. And while honestly I think he can work well with just about anyone in the cast, I think Axel is someone who he could bounce off of really well. I mean, you have the brainiac scaredy cat and the survivalist who has no fear in her soul. That kind of just writes itself. Now considering how early these two go in Season 1, this would probably be a dynamic confined to the pre-merge, only really taking root in 1 or 2 episodes. Now let's say for the hypothetical that Axel doesn't get out early in episode 2. Damien could help her keep a cool head and focus on the other team, helping them in the challenge a lot more than what happened initially. Now the team still loses of course, but in this timeline, both Axel and Damien have contributed to the challenge in a major way, which alleviates Axel's votes, and she doesn't get eliminated here. Probably Scary Girl gets eliminated because no one really likes her. And because of this, Axel is able to repay the favor in episode 3 when her athleticism really helps out in the obstacle course challenges and gets a key to Damien really quickly. So because of how well they'd work together, I think the two would start to balance each other out, with Damien helping Axel keep a cool head during the challenges and not feed people dead rats, and Axel could help Damien with his confidence, giving him the push that he needs to actually get up and do stuff. This relationship would probably be solidified in episode 4, where instead of Damien running from Scary Girl the whole challenge, Axel actually helps him out, and the two actually get some work done. Now, unfortunately, I think in this scenario, Axel would probably get eliminated over Ripper. He's obviously a fan favorite among the writing team, so I could see the votes probably breaking down to where Axel, Damien, and Priya vote for Ripper, and everyone else votes for Axel, with Millie getting a confessional about how she wants to keep Ripper around so she has more material for her notes. But even though Axel's only around for 2 more episodes in this hypothetical, I think you can already tell that she'd probably be a much more effective character. Now this might be cheating, but I'm actually gonna say that number 4 is actually gonna be based on the previous scenario. So in a hypothetical to the previous hypothetical, Ripper would get eliminated in episode 4 over Axel. I really don't like Ripper in season 1, and I don't think a lot of you do either, so I don't think anyone's gonna mourn him too much, aside from some people I know. Now if you'll remember, in the initial episode 5, Damien was campaigning for himself to get eliminated, but in this timeline, Damien is a little bit more confident thanks to Axel's influence, and the second person who was likely to be eliminated that episode, Ripper, is already gone. So I think this could lead to a scenario where Axel and Damien are butting heads with Priya and Millie, while Chase and Z are kinda stuck in the middle. I don't think they'd fight or anything, but they definitely disagree on a few things, and they'd probably be voting against each other just due to circumstance. It could be as simple as Millie and Axel having a clash of personalities, and Damien and Priya taking the side of their established ally. I think the team friction could add something to the episode, since otherwise the only real highlight is Z and Chase's antics. Now I did consider having Damien get eliminated here and putting Axel in Ripper's spot, but I think it's better if Axel gets eliminated here. It just makes more sense and offers more in the way of Damien development, which he really needs. Now you might be asking why one scenario that takes inspiration from the same idea is in 2 different spots. And the reason for that is after the first scenario, Ripper gets more development, and after the second scenario, Damien gets more development. So Axel's elimination pushes a different character forward. You also might be wondering why I've made 3 different scenarios that all have Axel go pre-merge, and the reason for that is Axel doesn't need to merge in season 1. I think all the bases are pretty much filled, and a scenario where she helps support another character is pretty much all she needs to do. For season 2, I think there's a lot more potential. While we won't be changing any of the elimination order from the pre-merge, we're still going to need to do some setup there to set up things with Axel later. My first idea is to involve Axel with Priya and Caleb's relationship. I think the complaints that these two take up too much screen time in season 2 would be alleviated quite a bit if some of the other characters were allowed to have a stake in it. Aside from Z, who had a plot with the 2 of them for a little while, and Julia, who was heavily involved with them near the latter half of the season, most of the other characters sort of just existed around the relationship. Which is fine, but I think things could have been improved if there was someone who had more of an interaction with them during the pre-merge. And for reasons that I can't explain right away, that character definitely should have been Damien, but for the sake of this video, let's use Axel. In Total Drama, alliances aren't quite as important as they are in Survivor, where you need to have a lot of alliances in order to stay in the game. In Total Drama, it's not that big of a deal. But how about this? Instead of Caleb being dead set on forming an alliance with Priya, he invites Axel to the alliance as well, seeing as they were both in a very similar position in season 1. And with both of them recognizing each other's physical prowess, they both join an alliance together with Priya. Now Axel is still a primarily support character in this alliance, where Caleb and Priya are the main 2, but I think that works. This gives Caleb and Priya someone else to interact with in the pre-merge so they don't become too dependent on each other, especially Caleb. Caleb's a good-hearted guy, but we knew he was on his best behavior when he was around Priya to try and win her over, so I imagine when it's just him and Axel, he'd probably be a lot more honest and forthcoming. So Priya would be his main concern, but Axel would be his game partner, so to speak. It was hinted early on that Caleb might be more nefarious this season, and this could be good misdirection for the future plot twist that he's actually just a good guy. But Axel could have a good dynamic with Priya as well. Priya is not good at hiding her attraction for Caleb, and since Axel's part of the alliance now, I don't think it's a stretch to say that at some point she might confront Priya about this, leading to a conversation where Priya vents her feelings. And all of this actually accomplishes something else as well. Axel didn't really have any friends in season 1. So following that, it would make sense that she might start to feel like a bit of an outcast once season 2 comes along. Even though she's close with Caleb and Priya in this timeline, she's still yet to find someone who really gets her. And this, my friends, is where we finally bring in Ripper. Rip Axel has a lot of problems, namely the fact that it's gross, kinda comes out of nowhere, and just generally is unpleasant. but I feel like a really underrated part of why this relationship is so bad is that it only focuses on Ripper's perspective until the two get together. That's not to say that Rip Axel is sexist or anything, that is a ridiculous claim, but considering how much of a one-dimensional character Axel is normally, giving her some perspective on the Rip Axel relationship before it actually happens would go a long way to improving not only her, but the relationship itself, and by extension, Ripper. So with this added context, maybe when Ripper actually confesses to Axel, the audience will have a reaction that's like, aw, look at those two crazy kids finally making out, instead of, what the fuck is this? Now, to continue their relationship from here, I imagine it would be very similar to the trajectory that it had in the actual season, just taken more seriously. They don't have to be a super complex relationship or anything, but I imagine instead of them just constantly making out and being gross, they're just like a normal couple, probably. And I think that's fine. And I think that for scenario 4, they can both be eliminated the same way they were in canon. And hopefully you can tell that even though her eliminated position is the same, there's still a big change that leaves Axel a much more developed and interesting character than she was before. Now, as I have hopefully convinced you by this point, Axel can be a good support character if used properly and not just as someone for Ripper to make out with. But what if for scenario 5 and 6 we were to get a little crazy? What if there was a timeline out there where Axel was a main character in Season 2? I know, terrifying. Now on the surface, this might sound like a writing idea on par with Nichelle being a main character, re-emerging in Disventure Camp, or Danny being the main character of Total Drama Next Generation. You know, terrible ideas that should never, under any circumstances, be done. But I do believe there's something we can do here. In order to find a satisfying way to make Axel a main character in Season 2, I believe that we could do something like this. Swap out Rip Axel for Calabria. Now at that point, it pretty much just is Total Drama Reboot Season 2 Red and Blue Edition, but the rules that I laid out at the start of this video were that the plot lines I created had to be better than the ones that existed in canon, and evidently, for Axel, I think this would be better. This is with the caveat that in this scenario, it's based on scenario 4, so Rip Axel making it to Caleb and Priya's spots in Season 2 is based on the timeline that I made when they're good. I hope you're still keeping track. Jokes aside, I think the late game of Season 2 changes a lot if Caleb and Priya are swapped out for Rip Axel. For one thing, I don't think that they're gonna fall for Julia's schemes as easily, but she will get an upper hand over them. Imagine a scenario where Julia is probing Ripper and trying to convince him that he should try and be more of an alpha male in the challenge. I promise this is serious. Basically, Julia would subtly degrade Ripper to the point where he would feel the need to prove himself in the challenges to prove that he's worthy of Axel. And I imagine this would lead to Ripper getting eliminated in Priya's spot, probably from overexerting himself too much. And this would lead to an intensely heated argument between Axel and Julia that continues into the finale. Now, does Axel win in this scenario? No. It's still Wayne. I still prefer scenario 4, but I think this one is decent at the very least. But scenario 6 is personally my favorite. For this scenario, Axel does indeed make the finale, and this is where things start to get real. It's been a long and arduous competition. Axel had it rough. Early on in the game, she had to vote off her closest ally, Nichelle, who she definitely had romantic chemistry with. She later had to deal with the fallout of Caleb and Priya's relationship, and while the two did eventually get back together, the stress of the situation took a toll on Axel's mental state. Worse yet, her boyfriend Ripper was idled out of the game by her sworn enemy Julia, and now, she was in the final 3 with her. And Wayne. Wayne was there too. But after the challenge took a rough turn, Wayne found himself crashed against the cliffside, and Julia, well, let's just say mullets aren't in season. Axel was excited. She was going to win. The finish line was so close, and she was only... Wait, what's that? Above her, Axel saw a shadow whoosh past her, darting towards the finish line like a speeding bullet. Before Axel knew what was going on, she'd already crashed, a few feet away from the finish line. She... lost? But how? Julia and Wayne were nowhere near the finish line. Wait. It's not Wayne or Julia, it's someone else. Someone tall, someone sharp, someone vastly underrated. Could it be? No, it can't. It is. It's All-Star Barkley.
Hey, this is Charles Barkley. I hope you enjoy the NBA playoffs on TNT. I hope you have enjoyed my T-Mobile Pay 5 list. I'm a dumbass.